Oklahoma Gardening is a production of the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the land grant mission of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University, dedicated to improving the quality of life of the citizens of Oklahoma through research-based information. Underwriting assistance for our program is provided by the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry, helping to keep Oklahoma green and growing. Today on Oklahoma Gardening, host Casey Hentges features the mighty Bur Oak. We visit school gardens at Adams Elementary School in Oklahoma City and Jenks Intermediate School. Extension Youth Specialist Shelley Mitchell shows a couple of methods that you can use to grow a garden inside. And Barbara Brown cooks a minestrone soup with parmesan cheese rind.
If you're looking for an excellent shade tree for Oklahoma, you might try the Bur Oak or Quercus macrocarpa. Macrocarpa meaning large fruit, and as you can see by the acorns that it produces, they are large indeed. One of the clear identifications for the Bur Oak is how hairy the cap is on the acorn. They will get up to 60 feet tall and even wider, providing plenty of shade in your backyard. Now, as all oaks, they provide plenty of nutrients to some of our wildlife, so they're good in that regard, especially the Bur Oak, because it's so large. A lot of wildlife will feed on these acorns. But as the saying goes, you can't plant an acorn in the morning and expect to sit in the shade that afternoon. So you might have to wait up to 35 years before you get your first acorns when you plant a Bur Oak. Bur Oaks are drought tolerant, and they can also survive well in heavy soils as well as high pH soils, so they do well in many Oklahoma environments. Now, oaks do have their fair share of diseases and pest problems, but Bur Oak is considered one to be low maintenance and long-lived. John Adams Elementary in South Oklahoma City, and joining me is Miss Ganjanathavada, and also known as Mrs. G, obviously.
Yes,
so,
that's good.
Mrs. G, tell us a little bit about the garden here and how you've incorporated it into your curriculum.
Oh my gosh, this is totally hands-on. It's hands-on science at its best, and it's nature for the kids. We start with soils. We teach different types of soils in Oklahoma. Then we go into the plants and planting the seedlings. Then we learn to maintain it by weeding, getting the little critters, the bugs out, and then we actually harvest at the end of the season.
So they're learning about science and cooking and recipes and math.
They are.
And watering.
Yes. They have a science lesson about the plants, the life cycle of the plants, and before they come out and actually do a project in the garden.
So you almost do a lab and then the lecture out here, basically.
Exactly,
so
we do.
These are second graders, is that
second
correct?
grade, second grade.
So does every second grader rotate through the garden at some point?
Yes, we have 4 second grade classrooms, and so they come up, the master gardeners, and they teach 2 classes. And then they come following 2 weeks later and the other 2. So we rotate the kids through it.
All right, and they do this in the spring and in the fall, so they get to see different crops each season, I guess?
Oh, we have grown, besides the flowers, we've grown cabbage, carrots, radishes, onions.
So what are you seeing in the kids and how they react to the garden?
That they're learning, they're excited, they actually get to touch what they're learning, they get to experience it, eat it, smell it. And it's teaching them and also how to care for another living organism, and that's important.
And is that some qualities that maybe you don't normally see in the classroom when they're in the textbook and that sort of stuff?
And on technology.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's good to get them out here in nature.
That's fantastic. And also they're getting a little energy out in the garden too.
Exactly. Oh, when the master gardeners come into the classroom, they cheer. Every time they cheer. They can't wait.
And we have to give a big shout out to the Oklahoma County County Master Gardeners because they've done some, I think, some modified junior master gardening programming here.
Yes, and their lessons, a lot of them are retired teachers, and their lessons are incredible. I learned from their lessons, but they teach wonderful science lessons for these children.
That's fantastic.
They do.
So how long has this garden been here?
We have been doing this program for at least 6 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, the raised beds seem like a good way, and it's the right height for the kids to get in there.
Oh, yeah.
And I noticed some of them were picking caterpillars and things like that off of the plants.
Yes. Well, this was started, we had a teacher, she's not here any longer, Miss Pizzuto. She began this program 6 years ago.
Okay.
And so she had the community come out, the moms and dads, and they built this. So she got the supplies, but the community put it together.
That's good. Are the parents and volunteers still involved?
They're involved with, especially during the summer when we need to keep it watered.
Okay.
We have outdoor watering, so the parents come up and take care of it. They water, they'll weed, they take weeds out. But they do.
That's excellent. And once again, it takes one leader, but then it takes a team of people to really make it work.
Yes, it does.
Fantastic.
Yes,
Thank you for sharing this, Ms.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad you came today.
Thank you.
Welcome to Jenks Intermediate Math and Garden.
Today we're at Jenks East Intermediate, and joining us today is Beth Wilson, who is a math teacher here. And Beth, I have to say, this is no math class that I've been in before. Tell us a little bit how you've incorporated the garden.
Well, they learned the same things as we do in the math class. We did area and perimeter and volume today using the beds. So they learned how to do the equations, and plus they learned the real world application of it. So they know that if they wanted to rebuild this bed, they can use the perimeter measurements that they did.
Definitely. So do you find that it might stick a little bit better using the real world applications?
Yes, and I teach language arts also, and at the beginning of the year, before they start writing really well, we plant something. I take pictures of all the steps, put the pictures up, and then they can write about each step. It helps them.
Oh, that's
with writing.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yes.
So I imagine they're also learning a little bit about gardening while they're out here.
Yeah. They love to come outside. We come outside and do this. We also do a trail that's next to our school. So as much as I can get them out into the environment so they start to understand how important it is to garden and to pick up trash and just to help the environment.
Yeah, and today we're not even out on a nice sunny day when most people like being out of the garden. I bet the kids still seem to enjoy it.
Oh, they will come out any weather. Yeah.
And so you also have some stuff going on in your classroom, is that right? Garden
Yes,
related?
right now we're doing radishes. So we have some lights that we're growing radishes.
Okay, and do you do that with math as well? Or?
We measure them to see how high and then they can graph it.
Okay,
to see
fantastic.
Yeah.
So what grade are we talking about here?
These are fifth graders.
Fifth graders.
Yes.
Okay, all right. So Beth, how long has this garden been here?
This is our third year.
Okay.
And we've learned a lot. We've killed a lot of plants, but we've learned a lot, and we try to get as many milkweed in the beds so that we can attract the butterflies, because that's part of the curriculum for science in fifth grade.
Okay, and you also have some bird houses or bird feeders behind us.
Right. We get some really good variety here in the winter, so we just put that back up because the weather changed.
Okay, so there's a lot of observation about nature going on that you incorporate as well.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about the difference between a fall garden and a spring garden and how you incorporate that into the curriculum.
In the springtime, we don't have that much time because you're just planting like hopefully in April, May, but we do have a tiller, and it's really fun to watch kids use a tiller for the first time. And we plant a lot of seed at that time, and we try growing seed in the winter to plant in the springtime.
Yeah, so they get that whole life cycle of
Right.
things. Excellent. Well, Beth, it looks like you're doing a fantastic job.
Oh,
I love
you.
the chalkboard paint that you put on the flower beds, the raised beds and things like that.
Yes.
And thank you so much for sharing this garden
Thank you
with
for
us.
visiting.
Okay, and what's our link? 32. Nope, link.
Okay, a lot of school gardens, their peak performance is during the summer when school's out. So one way you can extend the growing season is to grow inside the classroom. not only can you grow year round, but it eliminates the bugs. It eliminates taking a little field trip in the middle of the day that takes time. So you can have inside gardening in your classroom that's easy for the kids to see and maintain. So one way you can do this is a grow tent, which you can get online. There's lots of different places. And what you do with the grow tent is, this one's only about 2 feet deep, so it doesn't take up that much classroom space. So I'll show you what's inside the tent. So here we have onions and pepper plants. And all of these on the bottom, we actually grew from seed. It's only been about 6 or 7 weeks. So this is actually what you can have in just 6 or 7 weeks. So this originally came with no rack here. We just took some shelving and built another rack because this is so tall and we're not going to be growing corn or anything. So we're getting double use out of it. We have a light at each level. We started with this light, which is LED, and it has red light and blue light, and you can choose which one you want to use depending on if it's growing or flowering. We just have both on right now. And then down here we have an LED light that's basically a really long tube, and it equally disperses the light. LED lights are cool to the touch, so you can not have to worry about it catching on fire or burning some kid who's in there working on plants. Some of them actually come with a fan, which is not needed for the LED light, but it helps circulate the air, and that helps keep any fungus from growing, especially when you have a bunch of plants that are on top of each other practically. This is actually not soil. The soil is too heavy, and it would also have, bugs and diseases potentially. This is just potting soil like you get out of a bag at your local hardware store or big chain store. These are just plastic tubs. These are storage tubs. We didn't go for the high-tech, expensive stuff. These are just like you would find at any big chain store. The cool thing is they're clear, so you can see the roots growing. So this is really educational for the kids. To keep this from getting too full of water, we drilled holes in the bottom, and then we flipped over the lid that comes with the container and made a little water catcher. So you don't have to have expensive stuff. This is just, a few dollars at your local store. Now, the ones up here are covered in aluminum foil, and that is to help keep the light really shiny. It's not like absorbing into the plastic. It's actually bouncing around and keeping it really light, because this is not as strong as daylight. A system like this is about $200 or $300, depending on how much you spend on the little bins, how much potting soil you put in, what kind of light you use. So that's more expensive in terms of classroom gardening. For less than $100, you can start with this setup. This is just, again, plastic bins with holes drilled in and lids on the bottom to be water catchers. We didn't put as much potting soil in here because we're only growing things with shallow roots. This is just a car sun reflector, and that helps reflect more of the sun. We also put aluminum foil in the boxes to also help keep the light reflected. And this is just an LED light that's just sitting over 2 tubs at once. Now, we're just growing arugula in here and some radishes. Again, just little things that don't take that long, because kids don't have much of an attention span, so you want to grow something that's pretty quick. In here, we actually took some seeds from the produce we ate, and we're growing them not even from a seed out of a package, but from out of the fruit. So in this cup, we have seeds from a cherry tomato that we actually just put in there and let grow, that you bought at the store. So this is great to show kids where their food comes from the very start to the finish, all on the side of a table in your classroom. And it doesn't cost, just whatever you have around the house helps offset the cost. So old bins, aluminum foil, the main cost is in the light. All right, for classrooms that really don't have much space, or if you really don't have that money to work with, for about $25 to $40, you can have this setup. It's just one storage bin. Again, it doesn't have that much potting soil in it, like a half of a bag that you get at your average store. This is just a clamp-on light. It's got an LED light, which has actually come from the motion detector floodlight section of the grocery store. And it doesn't have any heat, so it's not going to burn the kids. And we just have arugula and radishes started in here. So depending on your budget, you can actually grow food in your classroom year-round. You can spend a few $100s on a setup like this. You can spend $50 to $100 on setups like these, and just for a few feet of space, you can have a convenient garden to actually eat from in your classroom.
Today we're doing minestrone. Now the reason we're doing minestrone is not because you needed to see how another soup was made, but because I wanted to show you how to use parmesan rind. So we'll get to that in a minute. I'm going to go ahead and get it started. I've got 3 tablespoons of a nice olive oil here, and a cup of chopped onions. And we're going to let these things cook along with a couple of other ingredients for about 3 to 4 minutes. We've also got 2 cups of diced carrots and 2 cups of chopped celery or diced celery. Now these ingredients are often used together in Italian food. We want to cook them fairly slow. We don't want them to brown, but we want them to start to become the onion transparent and soften up a little bit. There's a lot more cooking going on later on and a lot more ingredients. But while that gets started a little bit, look over here at the parmesan rind that we were able to bring home when we were in Italy. You can see that it's got some cheese on it, but not enough that you can really get to. But there's a lot of flavor in here, and you can get a lot of that flavor in there simply by using about an inch, maybe a finger width side, something along that size, putting that in the pot. These you can keep, and yours may not be this big as you grate the parmesan off the chunk that you have purchased at your cheesemonger or your market, but put them in the freezer, and when you have enough, you can either make a broth out of the parmesan. It pulls that flavor out. There's a little bit of umami flavor that's coming out with that as well because there's some protein in there. There's also salt in there, so we're going to add a little bit of salt to this, but we're going to wait and adjust seasoning at the end, which is something we should always do anyway. So these are, to me, almost priceless, not because I brought it home with me when we were in Italy, but because there's so many things you can do with it. Instead of adding it to this, as I said, you can make a broth out of just this and then store that in your freezer and pull it out when you're making something like this so that if you don't have a rind, you can still get all that flavor in there. It gives a whole different dimension to it, and as the rind, it doesn't clump and melt in the same way that it would if you grated some cheese or just threw a piece of cheese in there because the rind is tougher and not able to dissolve as quickly. So we'll go ahead and let this continue to cook down for a couple of more minutes, and then we'll come back and add a few more ingredients. Next thing we're going to add here is some garlic. Now this is 4 cloves of garlic, which would equal about 4 teaspoons of garlic if you buy the convenience version that's already chopped up for you. I tend to look for recipes for our segments that don't have tons and tons of ingredients on them. But once in a while, you're going to find something that you just need to do a little bit more for. So I've looked for a couple of spots where we can add some convenience to it, because as you can see, I have a lot of ingredients here, and there's a few more that are still hanging over on the side. So if you wanted to use the chopped garlic, that would be one thing you could do to make this recipe work a little bit better. Adding the garlic, letting it cook for no longer than a minute, and then we're going to start adding the other ingredients to it. Now this is 2 cups of chopped or diced zucchini. I tried to get it all fairly close to the same size, so that's going to go in here. It's more consistency of how you like it. You probably have a recipe for minestrone that you could rely on. This is just one, as I said, that we're using to demonstrate another principle. These are cut green beans. Depending on the season, you could use fresh. I'm using frozen. Again, another way that we can add a little bit of convenience to this process. Also going in here, I've got a ½ teaspoon of salt. And I use kosher salt. Again, remember, we can adjust the seasoning later on, and you should adjust the seasoning later on, but you can't take the seasoning out once it's in. So add smaller amounts and then increase. I'm also adding a ½ teaspoon of pepper, a teaspoon of paprika, and here you can make changes with the recipe based on the kind of paprika, whether you got one that was really hot or smoky. And then I'm going to add ½ teaspoon of rosemary. Now I'm using dried rosemary here, but I'm going to crush it up a little bit, partly because I don't like big things poking at me when I try to eat it, and these don't soften up completely. but also it helps release the flavor, and that's the primary reason. So crushing it up a little bit, you could use a mortar and pestle and do it even more finely. I don't really think that's necessary here, so I'm just going to stir those in together. And then I've got, again, using some of the convenience, this is a commercial container of small diced tomatoes or petite diced. You could use crushed tomatoes or you could use whole tomatoes and crush them yourself as you go through this. Now the interesting thing about using commercial is that the containers keep getting smaller. Price stays pretty much the same, but these used to be a 16-ounce container, then they were a 15-ounce container, and now they're down to, I think it's 14.5 ounces. So if you're using your own home cans, just use a pint. I've got 2 to 3 sprigs of thyme. I'm adding a bay leaf, and I've got 6 cups of, I'm using a reduced salt commercial chicken broth. You could use a homemade one. Again, it's just 6 cups. You could use a different kind of broth if you chose. You could use a vegetable broth if you were trying to go closer to a vegetarian recipe. Now, the thing we're going to add at this point is our Parmesan. So you can see I've just got a little chunk. I want to add it as this chunk, not grate it up. And you have options once you put that in there. It's not going to dissolve in here in all probability. It's going to be retained. So there's some things you're going to want to take back out before you serve. One would be the bay leaf. The next one, the leaves are probably going to fall off the thyme, but you're going to have to find the thyme sprigs that you put in. So it's a good idea to remember how many you put in the first place. And then that cheese. You don't have to take the cheese out. It's going to not dissolve. It's probably going to stay in a chunk. It becomes chewy, but it's edible. So depending on the occasion, if you're having people in for a more formal event, you may want to take it out. If it's just family, you may want to leave it in there and share it as part of the meal. It doesn't look all that attractive when it's done, but it's really, really good. So we're going to leave those. We're going to bring this up to a boil and then reduce it to a simmer and let it go about 20 minutes. Now you may think that because we have so many ingredients that this has taken a lot of time, but this has only been cooking for probably about 25 minutes. So by the time you get to that point, it doesn't take very long, and you can do a lot of that preparation ahead. Now I'm going to leave these in for a little bit longer, but you can see that most of the leaves are falling off or have added their flavor to the soup as far as the thyme is concerned. I've got a can of kidney beans, or you could use 2 cups of cooked kidney beans that you have cooked ahead of time and put into the freezer, or you've got them left from earlier in the week. And I'm using a dark red kidney bean because I think it adds more color. You could use other kinds of beans as well. Kidney beans are fairly traditional, but dark red, again, this is an homage to minestrone, not necessarily the traditional version, but this works very well, and it's a starting point for you. So those are going to cook about 5 minutes just so they get well heated through and some of the flavors penetrate into them a little bit. The kidney beans also add a really great texture when you're eating the soup. Surprisingly, with things that have cooked for a long time, we've got a lot of interesting textures. The beans are a little bit chewy. We have still, because we've not cooked it for hours and hours, we'll still have some texture being given from the carrots and the celery, and then we're going to add some pasta in a little bit, which gives you a little bit more of a slippery texture in there. So it's a lot of flavor, a lot of interest in this soup, even though it's fairly quick. 3 more ingredients we're going to add. I have about a half a cup or a little bit more of chopped parsley. And I used, it's fresh parsley. I used the Italian flat leaf parsley, and then the same amount of fresh basil. And if you don't happen to have fresh basil, maybe the season is wrong, or it's not available at your market, or it just doesn't look good, you could use dried basil, but add that earlier on in probably maybe a tablespoon, and add it when you added the rosemary later on, so you had time to get the flavor out of it. And then also I'm going to add 2 cups of cooked pasta. Now, some recipes for minestrone add the pasta and let it cook as it goes. This one is, again, one of those things where you could already have that done. This just needs to be heated through since it's already cooked. So by the time you get it stirred in, it's pretty much you're pretty much ready to serve the soup at this point in time. What we have here is minestrone. We have a great amount of flavor that we've pulled out of the rind of the Parmesan cheese. So I hope you'll give this a try. I'm going to add a little bit more Parmesan to it as a garnish, and you would probably want to serve this with some crusty bread. I hope you'll give this one a try. It's a very simple minestrone for Oklahoma Gardening. I'm Barbara Brown.
There are lots of great horticultural events this time of year. Be sure and consider these activities when you're making your plans for the weeks ahead. Next week, Casey has another great Oklahoma-proven tree. We shoot for the hoop to extend the growing season. In Oklahoma City, we visit the Millwood School Garden, and Oklahoma urban forester Mark Bays takes us on one tree's interesting journey to becoming a table. It's getting cold out there, so we hope that you'll stay warm inside and tune in for more TV you'll grow to love. To find out more information about show topics, as well as recipes, videos, articles, fact sheets, and other resources, including a directory of local extension offices, be sure and visit our website, oklahomagardening.okstate.edu. And we always have great information, answers to questions, photos, and gardening discussions on your favorite social media as well. Join in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find this entire show and other recent shows, as well as individual segments on our Oklahoma Gardening YouTube channel. And tune in to our OK Gardening Classics YouTube channel to watch segments from previous hosts. Oklahoma Gardening is produced by the Oklahoma Cooperative Extension Service as part of the Division of Agricultural Sciences and Natural Resources at Oklahoma State University. The Botanic Garden at OSU is home to our studio gardens, and we encourage you to come visit this beautiful Stillwater jewel. We would like to thank our generous underwriter, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food, and Forestry. Additional support is also provided by Pond Pro Shop, Greenleaf Nursery and the Garden Debut Plants, the Oklahoma Horticultural Society, and the Tulsa Garden Club.